Young Soul Rebels is a film that takes place in 1977, and it follows two friends who are pirate radio DJs, and this is all happening while there's a local murder investigation going on. Now, there's a lot that's happening in this film. It's a bit like William Friedkin's Cruising, Brian De Palma's Blowout, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, and a dash of Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. And if any of those movies sound good to you, then you might like this movie. But overall, I think this movie might not be for everyone. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But I still think it's important to talk about because of the historical value and it encapsulating a moment in time, specifically the UK during the late 70s. The main reason we're talking about this is because there is a gay character in this movie, and there is also a gay love story, and there are other gay elements in the film, and it also is juxtaposed with the political context, I believe, during the time. I mean, there is politics that they touch on, British politics, that kind of went over my head, that is also mixed into the plot and has to do later with the conclusion of the film. This, in my opinion, is a hangout movie. And if you don't know what that is, filmmaker Quentin Tarantino, I believe he coined the term, but it might have come before him. It's basically a type of movie where the main thing you get out of it is the ability to hang out with the characters, where plot and story are kind of in the background, and sometimes they're like a B plot, and that plot usually comes out near the end of the movie, but the vast majority of it is just kind of like hanging out. That's why it's called a hangout movie. And I feel like Young Soul Rebels is very much that. Even though there is a lot of plot going on, I feel like you don't have to really follow or be truly locked in to appreciate the movie. And let me give you an example. I'm not good at following plots. And I think that's why I like movies so much, is that they constantly surprise me. When I'm sitting in the theater and my friend or my boyfriend, sometimes they'll whisper in my ear and they'll tell me like, oh, I think this is going to happen. I always hate when they do that because they're most often right and I wouldn't have guessed it myself. So I do not like that. But here, I feel like the plot was a bit confusing at times, where I was having trouble figuring out where things were, not necessarily where things were going, but where things were. It was just fun to see what was going to happen next, even though necessarily I might have been a bit confused. Now I have to say that I'm also a sucker for British cinema. Mike Leigh is one of my favorite directors, and it's good to see a scene that happens a lot in Mike Leigh movies happen here, like where a character barges into someone's room and just berates them. And they did a great job in restoring this movie because it looks very clean, and Strand Releasing, I believe, did the restoration for this. There is a notion that a movie has to have a great story, and I'm not disputing that at all. But for me, sometimes the story doesn't have to be everything. If there are strong characters or there's strong cinematography, sometimes that's enough for me to really enjoy a movie. And here I got a lot of value out of those elements. Like, for instance, to be able to see like a time capsule of 1977, even though this film came out in 1991, it still was showing me a time and an era that I never got to experience, seeing the way people dressed, the way the culture was, the music culture specifically, and the club scenes. It was really insightful to see that. And also, the cinematography here is no slouch. There is really good attention to detail, especially with tracking shots. Not giving any spoilers away, but there is a big conclusion in the film in terms of like a big set piece that happens that seems very expensive. And it's pretty impressive that they were able to pull that off. I'm not sure how much this movie cost or whatever, but it was a really kind of like, wow, I didn't know they'd be able to do that. But the ending in itself does feel a lot unresolved, and not in a good way. I don't need movies to explain everything, not at all, but it almost feels like everything's wrapped up really quickly in a convenient way, and that might leave some people unsatisfied. For me, I enjoyed it on a different level, and I think that's why I didn't regret watching this movie. It just kind of felt right. The vibes felt right, and not to say that it's one of my, one of the greatest movie-going experiences I've had so far, but it's definitely not something that should be overlooked. I think this movie might work for some people. I would say if you give this movie a shot and 10 or 15 minutes into the film, you're not really vibing with the characters, then I won't say that you're really going to be, satisfied by the end of it. But if you put this movie on and you feel good and you're watching it and you're just kind of just going with the flow, then you'll have a good time. And I don't think that sometimes movies need to be the most, detailed, wonderful plot. Sometimes you can just chill with the characters, and that's a good time in and of itself.